We are very happy to welcome here Giorgi Rodionov with a talk about queer art from South Caucasus. We will have now a presentation and then we will open space for discussion. So yeah, let's slowly start.
Thanks so much again, everybody, for being here. It's very important all the time to have so many people around to share the experience, but also during this talk, I would like to hear your questions or opinions. So please don't wait for me to finish the sentence. If you have any questions, just raise your hand and yeah, anytime, just ask any questions. I want this conversation to be more based on dialogue rather than me reading the lecture. Yeah, so my name is Giorgi Rodionov. I was born in Tbilisi, Georgia. And yeah, I'm an artist and curator. 3 or 4 years ago, actually, we established the art space in Tbilisi. It's called Untitled. And during these 4 years, we have been collaborating with the artists from South Caucasus region, such as Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, and all of its conflict zones. And our main goal from the very beginning was to support queer and feminist rights in the region, including ethnic minorities as well, but the main focus we always had was the queer and feminist human rights, basically. And so we are using art to bring the dialogue between the communities in the region and to really open up the discussion in the societies. That's how, like, I was always like, yeah, like our space was always willing to give the space to especially queer artists in the region, and I will tell maybe a little bit the perspective of Western perspective of queerness in Georgia, because yeah, like once one Georgian priest said that like gay people don't exist in Georgia, but yeah, in most of the cases I think it is funny in a sense, but I've heard similar opinions from Western people as well sometimes when they're like coming to Georgia to enlighten people in Caucasus region to explain how it's done to live in a queer community, to have queer rights, and etc. etc. But if we go back to the history of Caucasus, especially South Caucasus region that I'm very familiar of, it has quite a large history actually that was always there, that was pretty much accepted and part of the culture. And for example, one of the story is about Quintos. Quintos were special men in Georgian dance, which were performing the queer dance. So they're like 2 or several men dancing with each other, and from the very beginning, it was understood that it was, yeah, like we don't have this word queer in Georgian, but there was not really much need to really explain anything, because it was, as we know, at least accepted in the society and in the culture as well. So right now, like if you look at Georgia's dance national ballet, basically, you see all this like very, yeah, aggressive, masculine, but also like femininity sometimes is becoming aggressive there as well. But in this like very aggressive dancing, sometimes you see quintos as well, which are still performing only men, but dressed up in a very special way, and they have this like red fabric hanging, and then they're doing stuff. But so it doesn't stay as just the rumors. Around 10 years ago, they found this plate, the vinyl, which is really cute, actually. It's about a guy who is singing about 2 other guys, and he's like oh, these two guys are in love with me, but I cannot choose. One has money, but other is more lovely. And it is like from 1950s, basically, and it was recorded in on this like X-ray. You know, this like plastic thing that you put on the light box, and you see your X-ray of your lungs. So it was recorded on this material, but we see that it was recorded in a very yeah.
I just wanted to ask, what time in history were quintos like present, or like is this like very old history, or is it centuries ago, or?
As we know from like historical facts, they are starting from 18th century, basically, when Tbilisi becomes this like the mecca of parties, of the crossroad between Asia and Europe. Because like Georgia was standing on this Silk Road, so there were a lot of products coming from China to Europe, especially silk back then, and Georgia was kind of a crossroads where people would just like stop by and either exchange the goods or really party hard. And Tbilisi especially was the spot. And in that period, historical period, this specific type of men were very popular. It was like part of the show as well. So it was not like everybody was quintos in Tbilisi, but yeah.
So do you think it could have been like a way for queer people at the time to express themselves through this type of dance? So like maybe it was like an outlet, like drag shows now, kind of?
I would see it more as a show back then, which was pretty much accepted. But again, like Georgia's history was not really well documented in those times, so we don't really know if it was like common practice in like general society as well. But on the stage, at least, it was like very much accepted and very much used as well, because like when we talk about Georgia's national ballet, it is still there. These guys are still like there, basically. And yeah, let's listen to this song and then we can continue. Yeah? I'm not gonna put the whole song because it's in Georgian and I don't know how many of you speak Georgian. So yeah, this was the image of the guy. Yeah, etc., etc. Yeah, so these were quintos basically, and I just want to say that like it started way before, and then when photography came, when all this like new technology where people were actually documenting. As we are talking more about the region, also not only Georgia, there is this ethnic Armenian photographer who used to live in Istanbul. But she had a lot of connections in the region as well. She was the first documentary photographer in Turkey, and she was documenting a lot of queer people in her studio. And it was not happening in like after 90s, basically. It was happening in the beginning of 19th century. Yeah, so this also like clearly shows that like being queer is not as new thing in the region as it is sometimes shown in Western medias as well, but also like it is understood as like part of like identity in the region of Caucasus as well. Yeah, I just before talking about Sergei Parajanov, I don't know why the link doesn't work, but yeah, okay. Stuck. Yeah, and I wanted to show this think, but I don't know. Yeah, video is stuck. Yeah, anyways. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, I want to continue with then together with Soviet Union and bringing basically the power of imperialistic thinking as from Russia. It started. It was again Georgia especially, and the region was understood as uneducated. We don't know anything what's going on in the world, and yeah, and then bringing this new terminologies as well, queer, gay, which was never existing in the language. It was bringing more and more foreign to the issue of queerness in the society. And yeah, it became harder and harder for queer people to live in the communities and to continue their lifestyle as it was before, and they were getting more and more suppressed, and then laws changed, everything changed, and I wanted to talk about Sergei Parajanov because he realized basically. Yeah, in his movies, his movies are very crazy. It's very special and based on symbolism and based on the stories as well. But why I like his movies and why I think his movies has until now opportunity to really change something in the society is that he's not bringing the foreign in the countries like Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, but he's using already existing culture and trying to show his thoughts, his ideas around it, right? So he's using what is already in the culture, and all this transmutation basically inside the culture. It's not only about the gender, but all the lifestyle and all the stories that are that it for me basically Caucasus is gender neutral trans person, whatever, because it was always something mixed and very complex. And he's showing it very much in the movies as well. When, for example, in this scene, he's showing this woman who transfers into a man. That's not the original soundtrack of Parajanov. Yeah, and another thing what I really like about his movies also, he's using all three languages basically in the movie. So they speak in Azerbaijani, Armenian, Georgian, sometimes even Farsi, I think. But yeah, I just don't want to continue too much talking about one specific topic because I again want to open up more a discussion, and let's see. Yeah. So this was another Georgian artist, Vakhtang Chabukiani, who was also openly gay persona, public figure in the country, and everybody knew about his sexuality, everybody knew about his lifestyle, but he was one of the most beloved men also in the country, and until now, the theaters and ballet houses and stuff, they have their name on their door basically, and until now he's the hero of Georgia's culture. But again, it was all about the stage, and we don't know how much it was on daily basis and how much troubles we were getting in daily life or not. because again, like what we see, was documented was only like official archives or like the archives that sometimes we are like finding somewhere, right? And then Soviet Union collapsed and Western Union, sorry, Western worlds just like jumped in to the new democracy, and it's totally different era starting in the region when like before it was like very much straightforward imperialism, which is like telling you what to do with very straight propaganda, and like the state basically tells you what to do, and if you're not doing it, you're going to jail. But then we have another agenda basically coming in, which is understood as like loving to be colonized also, because there was this Georgian philosopher who was researching the relationship between colonized and colonizers, and after this collapse of Soviet Union, Georgia wanted to become part of European Union so much that in many cases they were overdoing a lot of things, and right now we even have this terminology called Euro renovation, which is basically just like tearing down everything what you had from past in the house, and just like putting just like random plastic furniture everywhere, basically. But it symbolized basically like saying goodbye to the Soviet past, and then put whatever you have, because like it was also like total tragedy with economy in the country. And that's how... Oh, no?
Democratically elected leader, President Gamsa was appealing to the West for help in battling what he called the terrorists. At least 30 people are dead, more than 250 wounded. Sheila Kast is in the capital city of Tbilisi.
The rebels are using every kind of weapon they can lay hands on to attack what has become President Gamsa focus.
Yeah, that's how Georgia started its independence, basically. And that's when I was also born, in 1990. And therefore, from now on, I can tell like my personal experience with country's developments with queer rights, but also like artistic involvement in developing better future for queer or feminist rights. Yeah, I will skip this also. So together with this like war at total madness, when the whole country for more than 10 years didn't have like proper electricity or water or or gas, or like even bread was like very hard to get in those years, Tbilisi started to like really open up the art scene especially, and art scene especially underground, because that was the safest areas of the cities, because upstairs in the streets there were like the rains of bullets for 10 years or more, and the safe space was like underground, basically. Like literally, you had to go underground, and in Tbilisi, you would see a lot of fashion shows and a lot of pretty much queer parties as well, and different performances, and it was basically like the booming scene that started in 90s. And yeah, and then it developed into more like yeah, going upper in the street when the bullets were stopped. Yeah, Georgia developed its sense of like music scene, which was another like really great jump for supporting queer rights in the region, but in the city at least. When they opened the first queer-friendly cafe, bar / club called Cafe Gallery. And this was basically the first first step to bringing techno clubs, techno culture in the city, and bringing stages, the safe space for queer communities. And yeah. Yeah, I want to go back to Azerbaijan. Yeah, I will talk a lot more about techno scene and queer aspects in the clubs in Tbilisi. But it was 2011 in Düsseldorf, I think, when Azerbaijan won Eurovision. Let's check what was happening there. Listen what commentator has to say. Yeah, that's how.
Nikki entered the competition separately or put together. As I say, Nikki lives in North London with her 2 kids, Jasmine and I think it's Saida. They're 1 and 3. They must be thrilled that I'm on right now. That run gives you some idea of how enormous the stadium is. There they are.
Yeah, basically, commentator is continuing very hilarious comments, such as if they have nice hotels in Azerbaijan. Do they? Do you? Yeah. This.
When they were hosting like some kind of, were they hosting Eurovision?
Yeah, they hosted next year. Yeah.
And then they advertised their tomatoes and stuff like that.
Actually, they have good tomato. But like this attitude, basically, that like I meet these kind of people so many times in my life as well. But also like I read so many articles in English-speaking countries, basically, where they have like zero clue about the region, but also like unconsciously really insulting people. Basically, they think that it's just like a jungle. Like, do they have hotels there? Like what? And then like I don't want to listen to it again. But then he's really insulting the girl who is like honestly happy and like emotional, and he's like, is she faking it, or do they really love like this? I'm like, what the hell? But again, like the relationship between our region and Western is still strange, because like if you ask like random people in the region, it is still like the Europe and the West is like the best place ever, and it is obviously like if you go there, there is a heaven, and ourselves is really like a jungle. And so this is like the relationship that I was talking about, not only in the daily life, but also with the language. When I was mentioning that like talking about queer rights in the culture, but also in daily life, instead of like continuing our own language or our own ways of dealing with the problem, we decided to bring the foreign language as like Western language, Western terminology into dealing the problem, such as we think that the gay pride will solve all the issues of queer community in the region, or we think that if we call somebody gay but not whatever Georgian word is, I even forgot already, that would be like cool, you know. And it became like so radical that it is actually like doing much worse than helping. So this Eurovision, I didn't come here just because of showing how ridiculous the guy was, but it's almost caused the war between what's going on? Yeah, it caused just 1 second. Yeah, it caused like a really huge diplomatic scandal between Azerbaijan and Iran, actually, back then. There were lots of protests. I don't know if you remember, actually, no? There were like big protests in front of Azerbaijani embassy in Iran, and vice versa, because Tehran was thinking that Europe is bringing gay pride to Baku, and this is this Baku. No, kidding. I don't know. I just found this video and I love it because that's how many people imagine probably in Azerbaijan also Eurovision coming to Baku. This Azerbaijani president. Yeah. Yeah, like Eurovision didn't have anything to do with the gay prides, at least in this form. Georgia started to have one of the first attempts of gay pride, which was total failure. But somehow this like Eurovision coming to the region was like a little bit. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but it was like quite like radical change, basically, when again this like totally different language jumped into the region, when it was not meant to be translated into the culture or into the lifestyle of the region, but more like bringing this we are right, we know how to treat this situation, and you should just like accept our ways of dealing with the issue. And it really caused much more problems than good part. And sorry. Yeah, and then it was 2013 when 20 activists in downtown Tbilisi wanted to just stand for gay rights, basically, and yeah, it was not meant to be any kind of like walking pride or anything like that, but just like literally 20 activists just standing in the street. But the church, which has like the biggest power in Georgia, decided that it is very dangerous for their own reputation and for their own mafia businesses, and yeah, it probably was promoting democracy as well, that they are not really in love with. And then church called their own people, and it caused like total tragedy for not only for the people who were standing in the street, but for the whole community, because it showed like how much aggression church can collect and direct to the people that they are not really big fans of. And this was just the event. So basically there were like, I don't know, more than 10,000 people gathered in front of parliament with the motivation of picking up everybody who was demonstrating for gay rights. And imagine like 10,000 people, 20 people. And this was basically like the start of the gay pride attempts in Georgia. We still didn't manage to have the gay pride, but yeah, I don't want to go very deep in it.
Last July, when I was in DC, I was walking along, I forgot the main avenue. Rustaveli. And there was an endless stream of people, and apparently it turned out that it was like they were countering Pride because it was happening on the same day. So they took away Pride from the city because the police will not would not attend to protect. But so it was kind of the most shocking part about it was that the stream of people had this like interaction with the church on Rustaveli. So Rustaveli had people coming in and out, and it was kind of like this very strange sort of like event of like people coming together to agree that they really hate gay people. And also at the same time, at the Pride event, I think there were like people trying to get in with guns, and then so they also had people protect Pride Festival with guns. So I'm not sure what exactly happened there because I wasn't there. I didn't go.
Yeah, that's great you didn't go because it was very dangerous. And actually it was quite an interesting story because many people that I know in the queer community were also against of Tbilisi Pride because in many cases it becomes a political agenda of the country, especially when there is like the election coming up, and government somehow still believes that majority of Georgia is against of queer rights, which I don't think it's like true. I mean, they might be like not the happiest people having gay men around, like with the rainbow flags, but I don't think it's their like main concern, because Georgia is suffering with like really strong economical depression, I would say, and general like territorial aspects, etc., etc. And yeah, there are no jobs, nothing, and I don't think like for these people having queer people around is like the biggest issue ever. But somehow the politicians they think that this is number one problem of Georgia, and therefore they are mobilizing the power to show how against they are against queer people, especially in the street, visible. And that's how like many people in queer community are against of Pride in those times when there is like election just basically next door. And I don't know if you're talking about, was it last year or 2 years ago?
It was just this summer.
Oh.
And I was there.
But this tragedy, was it last year? I don't know. Yeah, anyways, so it was also like election coming up. I think it was 2 years ago when there was this huge drama going on. Yeah, it was 2 years ago, exactly in July as well, when like another election was coming up, and yeah, people tried to have Pride, but in the end, like because of the threats, they couldn't go in the streets. But all these people who were already mobilized by Russian-backed organization. It's called Altinfo, and there are like different other organizations that are getting fundings. We believe that they are getting fundings from Russia directly, and they were mobilized already in the streets, and there were no Pride people in the street anymore, but just them, just angry men and journalists. and that's how around like 52 or 53 journalists were really hardly beaten up by the demonstrators, and one of them died. And in this situation, police didn't do anything. When, like, for example, like a few days ago, they arrested 21 years old guy who was demonstrating a few weeks ago in Tbilisi, and he's gonna go to jail from 7 to 10 years probably. But when they killed a person and they beaten so many journalists in the streets, nothing really happened to them. So that's what I mean. It's always like tricky with the political situation in the country, and yeah. I was talking a little bit about their. Yeah.
No, I'm just thinking right now that basically that's what governments do. Like they find kind of a scapegoat to like divert attention from the actual problems to make somebody like, no, this is the problem you should be worried about, so that people may not realize what's going on, that they're just being manipulated, and that way they're like, same thing's happening, has been happening in Ukraine, you know, like making, because I'm Ukrainian, and so like same thing has been happening in Ukraine, that like making queerness like a totally Western notion, and you know, the idea of gay Europa, that like gayness only exists in Europe and in the West, and it's not Ukrainian values, and it's like totally diverting attention from everything else that's going on, and like all the Russian colonization that has been going on for centuries before the war began. And so like, you know, so like obviously this is systematic, this has been happening for a very long time, and like people who are doing this, they know what they're doing. And because this has been happening for generations, it's so difficult for people to see past it.
Yeah, thanks so much for this comment. And yeah, I totally, I'm on your side in this comment. And I think like we also need to choose like the right way how to deal with this issue, because they have quite big power actually. And we also need to be smart not to do even worse, because like, for example, when this Pride attempt happened 2 years ago, for a month at least, I couldn't wear shorts in the city, and this is the city where like we have at least like 3-4 really huge drag shows, and like there are so many gay bars and so many like openly gay clubs, etc., etc. But after this attempt, like this tension rose so much in the street and in the community that like my friends, they cut their hair because it was like people were just like looking at him weirdly because of his long hair, and people had to move out from their apartments, and it became especially vulnerable for trans people, and because they are like even more visible in the street, and the aggression is getting more towards them, and yeah, that's what we got after this attempt, but then it just like slowed down and came back to normal. But yeah, that's how I think we need to choose like the right way, or like careful way how to deal with this issue. And one of the really strong tools for me was like the club scene entering Tbilisi, basically, where the stage became like the safe space, not only like openly queer people, but also homophobic people as well, like who had actually possibility of going there inside the club and see that gay people are not the monsters, and it's actually okay to dance with them or to be next to them, etc., etc., etc. Me personally, I met quite a few people who told me directly that I really hated gay men, but after going to Bethanien and like after a few nights there, I realized that it's actually fine, and and that's how I think like the stage or the dance floor in Georgia is like one of the really strong tools for better human rights and for better understanding each other, basically, because it doesn't come like from one side and telling how cool we are, but it brings a space where people can communicate, people can explain to each other like directly without waving the gay flags or doing other comments basically in social media, for example, which is becoming very aggressive. But where it's like people can actually live together and dance together. And well, Georgia government again saw this development, and it was 2018 when yeah, I remember I was also in Tbilisi, and it was Friday night, and well, he got to the club after 4 a.m. or something in Tbilisi, so we were just like drinking and getting ready for dancing, and it was 1 a.m. or yeah, 1:30 or something like this, where we learned that like the special forces with like machine guns and masks and like full equipment basically raided several clubs in Tbilisi. And yeah, I'm just gonna show the video, but it brought a lot of demonstrators in the streets later, and it was like one of the most beautiful ever demonstration I've ever been to. Basically, it was again like around 10 or 20,000 young people raving in front of the parliament for 2 days. Like from Friday night till Sunday, basically, instead of like being in Bethanien club, we were in front of Parliament demonstrating / dancing on some German DJs.
Welcome to Tbilisi, Georgia's capital. There is a booming music scene here, built by the country's pro-Western youth, with clubs that are a safe space for LGBT people.
We are free, and we need to be free.
But they're facing resistance from powerful forces.
But again, like this is Western media. There was nothing about Russia, like on this demonstration. It was like purely against like one specific action, and somehow the media is like showing Russian tanks, which is like, I mean, we have this problem, yes, but like the demonstration didn't have anything to do with that. You know, it's kind of like help, but not really. When like you're trying to help someone, but you are actually not really realizing that you're like insulting them. Basically, you're telling them what they're not doing, but you're telling them, "Oh, you're doing great. You're going against Russia." I'm like, no, I mean, in general, we are against the Russian occupation, of course, but this specific moment is not about it. And so this misunderstanding or like understanding from Western perspective and like trying to improve things in the region, sometimes it's not really helpful. Sometimes it's way opposite. Yeah. Another beautiful reportage.
Georgia was seen as a real democratic success story years ago, having cast off Moscow's influence. But
this is the event I was talking about, actually.
Democracy is in reverse. From Tbilisi, Rehan Dmitry reports.
On July the 5th, Georgia's far-right groups attacked the offices of Tbilisi Pride. They were here to stop the LGBT activists from holding their march.
It was described as one of the darkest days for Georgian democracy.
That was the most scary day, and I knew that if they would catch me, they would kill me, definitely. What happened on 5th of July was against humanity, against our citizens' interests, against democratic values.
Activists managed to escape while the angry mob turned on journalists. 53 were attacked, including cameraman Lekso Lashkarava, who later died. The authorities blamed an alleged drug addiction. This is the leader of the far-right group Alt-Info, inciting violence days before the gay pride. They now have their own TV channel and political party. Can I simply ask you one question? Do you justify violence?
It's depends what you call violence.
Beatings?
There are situations when you protect something which is very valuable with not only your words but with force.
Alt-Info supporters say they were defending Orthodox Christian values by putting up a cross outside Parliament. Then, in protest against liberal values, they tore down the EU flag.
So this was the event actually I was talking about. Again, it's we also had like demonstration a few weeks ago, which was really great, and it was really huge. But again, it showed this like the importance of music and dance with the Georgia's young people. Basically, I couldn't really find the video that I wanted to show, but there were like again police raids on the demonstration with like tear gas and water cannons and stuff like this, and sometimes we had this like the police siren sound. Like, can you find it? Yeah, maybe we can watch it. And it has this like wee 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 wee. And there are like few videos where the demonstrators are actually dancing on the video, which is so beautiful and so it symbolizes for me like the Georgia's way of dealing with the issues sometimes when it is threatening so much that like you have no other option, just like dance with it basically. And so maybe my friend Khatia will find the video. If not, okay. Don't look at the screen.
But it's on Bethanien page.
Okay. Can we put this on? Yeah, and actually, like this dance won after dancing 2 days in front of Parliament again. We had the opportunity not to let Russian law pass. I mean, it was already passed, but they revoked the law, which was against foreign agents, basically. And yeah, so that is what I wanted to say. And if there is a question or comments or anything like that, let's talk. Yeah, so I would be really happy if you have any questions or comments or anything like that, or if you want to dance, that's an option as well.
I have a question as regards of Tbilisi being also a gathering ground for kind of queer refugees from like Dagestan and Chechnya, and how the situation is right now, how they are embedded, and if there have been any recent changes in their status or in the relationship between the Tbilisi queer community and the communities further up north in the Caucasus. Because I think it's also quite interesting for people to know that relationship within the countries.
Yeah, thank you so much for this question, actually. This is very important topic that I, like me personally, have been dealing a lot with, and also the art space that I'm running, Untitled. For last year, we hosted around 15 artists who had to escape from their countries, and they like 2 of them were transgender artists from Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan is also like quite problematic, maybe not as problematic as Chechnya, but it is. They have like very strong issues, especially on visibility in the street. With recent developments from like people, especially activists coming from Russian territory, is a little bit strange. I really don't have any clear answer, but there are moments sometimes when people are stopped entering the border if they are coming from Chechnya. So, like, again, like, I don't know the statistics, I didn't research it fully, but there were a few cases when white Russians were more than welcome to enter the country, especially from Upper Lars border cross through the mountains, not through the airports, but through the land border. Yes, again, like like white Russians, I would say, like people who have white skin, blonde hair, they were like more than welcome to enter, but people who had darker skin or who were coming from Chechnya, Dagestan, etc., from North Caucasus, I've heard that there were many stories that they were simply stopped and they couldn't go back to Russia also because they left Russia and they were not allowed to enter Georgia. And there were quite few days when like it was almost catastrophe when people had to stay in the buffer zone in so cold weather in upper mountains in like March, let's say, or late September when the second round started with mobilization in Russia. So it is very hard, and there were like many cases with queer activists as well, but yeah, some managed to enter, some not, again because of their ethnicity, and this is really bad. But yeah, but there are like many organizations in Georgia who are working especially for that to support them, and if they manage to get in touch with Georgian organizations, then we're trying our best to help as much as we can. But if they are entering solo without any support from Georgian organizations, then they might face some troubles. Maybe right now it's a bit easier because the situation came down a little bit, but when there was, because like when second mobilization started, especially in September, it was like 30 kilometers to Georgian border of people waiting to cross the border. So it was a little bit different story, but thank you so much for this question.
Thank you for the presentation. And is there any kind of support we could offer the movement, or is there ways we can do something from here?
If you could do something from here.
Yeah, or we can anyway help.
Them, you mean Georgia's queer community, or? Yeah, I would say, yeah, I don't know. Maybe you can just come and party. Yeah, like yeah, the only help is basically like really being together, right? And without also being aware of the situations in the region, because like Georgian queer activists, they're doing quite well, I would say. I mean, they're doing their job well, but then there is a problem of finances. There is a problem of like because Georgia's NGO sector, or like the people who are really actively promoting the queer rights, they are really struggling. The only money they get is from Europe. So actually, if you are like resident of Germany, you are helping already Georgia's queer community without knowing. But yeah, other than that, I would say like just awareness and just come and party. Yeah, I don't know.
There is Wizz Air flying from Berlin to Kutaisi.
So cheap. It's very cheap.
If in advance, very cheap.
Yeah, and yeah, sometimes you get like really ridiculous price, like 20 euros, 50 euros, and Georgia clubs are really cool actually. And yeah, this August I might bring some Georgia's drag queens to Berlin, so you're also invited to the party here. We are collaborating with, we are talking to 2 spaces right now, so it is not fully decided where exactly, but yeah, maybe we can exchange the contacts, so I can let you know.
Or you can follow maybe Giorgi on social media.
Yeah.
Like you can follow Giorgi on social media, and then maybe you will know about it. I will also maybe write about it on Translocalities. Like.
There was one question.
I have one question and one thought, which is, I'm always a bit skeptical of just like the party scene as a political movement, just because in Berlin I don't really see it. But like I feel like the techno scene here is only political when it's being directly affected, and otherwise they do their own thing. And also I'm a bit skeptical of straight people joining queer spaces and having fun there and then actually changing their mind, because I don't see that happening where I'm from. It might change in groups of friends, but I don't know what change it brings to the everyday life and to like family dynamics or anything. So I wanted kind of to ask how you feel about this, if you feel it's different, maybe also because the threat is bigger, more direct than in Germany or Portugal where I'm from, but I don't know, I always feel like it's not enough to have the stage as a safe space, because the stage is always the stage, and then, yeah.
Yeah, totally. Sorry if I didn't like continue my thoughts, but I don't think that it's enough to have only the stage. But with Georgia's situation, maybe it's different in different countries, but with this is different stage. If the stage is just like a singer singing and then like they're like crowd down and then they're doing their own stuff, la la la. This is different stage. But when like you're basically together, you're creating the stage, right? In the case of the clubs, especially in Georgia, where it's like it's not fully underground, but it is something that you're like, if you're going there, you know that you're going there for the party, obviously. I'm not saying that like everybody who goes to a club, they are thinking about politics. Obviously not. But you know what kind of mindset is waiting there, and you know what kind of room you are entering. In that case, I think it has the possibility to change something. But again, like it's not gonna be the only option, and like if everything else is burning down, like this is not gonna be the ice cube. Yeah, I think like in Georgia's case, it is like one of the elements, because we love parties and we love drinking and we love other stuff. But like also like if you know like different style of parties in Georgia, also like it is like cultural heritage already of Georgia's toast making, and it is like the leading point of Georgia's lifestyle basically. When they drink, they make toasts, and they like the supra, which is like the feast, is going like endlessly. But again, like there are like these different aspects of being together as a community and sharing the thoughts or like mutual activity. And in that case, maybe in Georgia it's a little bit different when it is kind of needed to be together. But yeah, I think it has some aspect of help, obviously not the only one.
Can I add something to that? Because from my experience going out there and going out here in Germany, it's something completely different as well, because there's this cathartic release that I experienced seeing people how they felt while they were going out, because it's like finding a way out when your existence is frowned upon. So I think it's when you go out here in the techno clubs, it can feel quite like, if you compare it to Georgia, the political aspect is not there at all actually. Not that it has to be, and not that everyone who's partying in Tbilisi is like, oh, we're doing politics. That's not what is happening. But I think it's like the cathartic element is really, really important. Yeah, and I felt that it's important for these.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, and maybe that's a good explanation also, that like here you don't really need to like. Yeah, you can wear like high heels in the street, right? Or like do whatever you want. In Tbilisi or Georgia, sometimes it's getting harder, and then as our friend is saying, it's becoming more like a catharsis for some people, maybe not for everybody, but for some people, it's like the way of just like being yourself, and really like it's almost like therapy, basically.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk and presentation. You talked about the queerness in Georgian culture, and it made me think about the languages. I come from Sakha Republic in Russia, and there all the discussion around queerness and queer spaces is in Russian, and I believe it's happening mostly because we don't have any words in Sakha to describe this thing. And it makes me feel very detached from my origins, and I would want to have these discussions in my first language. And I wanted to ask how present the Georgian language is in these queer discussions within Georgia.
Yeah, that's. Thank you so much for this question, actually. And I have the feeling I didn't really talk as much as I wanted during this presentation about the language aspects, but I think this is like one of the really most important aspects of like, again, like bringing even more foreign to the topics, and kind of, yeah, like with Georgia's situation, it's not only about the queer terminology, but it's also about like general things, like people started to replace the words like from Georgian to English, like event or like, I don't know, class or whatever. Like there are so many words that they are using now. They're saying it's in English rather than using it with their own language, which is like sometimes it's not. They don't need to invent. It's there. It's like there. But just because again this like aspect of relationship between colonized and colonizer relationship, when like you're thinking sometimes that like the colonizer is so cool that you just want to become it, but you're overdoing it, and then it becomes that like you're basically having this like very weird relationship and like some kind of puzzle that you cannot really get rid of it anymore. With colonizer, in this case, I mean like the general understanding of the Western terminology and Western world, which is, or capitalist approach as well, which is pretty much present in the region. And yeah, sadly, it's not only about the queer, but like in general, in Georgian situation, like many words are already replaced, and we already forgot few words like queer terminology. Like it's not there anymore. It was there. There were like different words, but because it was not used at all, it became so weird that now when you say that word, it's just like, what is this? Like, of course, I'm not gonna say Mamat Mawali. I'm gonna say gay instead. And then it's like this like weird circle that we are entering. And I wish there were some people who would take initiative to deal with this, but I don't see it yet in Georgia. I know in Armenia they did it. They worked a lot with the language, and yeah, but not in Georgian case.
Hello, thank you. One, your thoughts on celebration as resistance. I felt like it related a little bit to the conversation that was happening earlier. And also, I'm Mexican Argentinian, and in Argentina there's been a push to modify, I guess, the language to make it more inclusive, and they've changed words, right, to be inclusive, for the language to be inclusive, but there was a lot of resistance, right? They're like, that's not Spanish, we're making it up. But it's worked, you know, and people have adopted it, so what do you think it would take? Could it be a movement, an initiative to, I don't know if modify the language per se, but a decision to make Georgian inclusive, right? Or rather than, you know, using gay or whatever other English terminology. So the feasibility of that, and also thoughts on celebration as resistance.
Yeah, celebration is always needed. Yeah, again, I believe in celebration of not. I don't think Georgia has anything to celebrate right now with queer rights. I would start with that. And I think it is still the time for fighting. It is still time for fighting in every stage, basically. And that's why, in my opinion, I don't think I have like enough power to just like go and celebrate in the street of Georgia when like I know that a lot of people in the community are still struggling a lot, and I know that this celebration might cause a lot of problem with the people that are not really brave enough to be in the streets, really brave enough to open, basically, but they're like hiding inside themselves. And I know that like for some people in Georgia, still it can become like very huge trouble. And in that case, like I love celebration, but I think we need to have something to celebrate with. Sorry, I'll finish and then. Okay. Yeah, and about the language, Georgian language is very inclusive already, and that's another thing. Like when now there is this new title, they, or newish. In Georgia, we don't need that because everything is already they. It's like there's no gender in the language, yeah, we don't have she, he. We just have one word, yeah, that's very interesting actually. Sometimes like these like new terminologies are like coming and are pushed so much to change, but it's already there. But then like we are starting to think like maybe we need to change something, but then we're like, no, but we already changed. but you need to do something about it because West is doing it, and we're like, then we are confused, and then I will not be surprised if Georgia will start like calling people in plural, just because of being like political correct in the Western understanding. But it would be just ridiculous when like we already have it, you know. So yeah, I really like Georgian language in this case because it's already very much neutral.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting to see the region again.
Thank you.
My question is more like comment plus question. It's about foreign agents law. First of all, it was very empowering to see power of people in the region change something. But at the same time, on Twitter, I mean, I wasn't in Georgia or in the region, so I was following from the Twitter or social media. I saw lots of tweets and posts about we are supporting European values here. So that's a bit annoying to see we are, I mean, kind of, should we choose between these two imperialist power, like Russian or Europe? Like that's, I know it's very important to, I cannot really discuss this with my Georgian friends because it's a bit vulnerable topic, and a little bit different comment can put me also in the Russian supporter part, but I am not. And also that wasn't right moment to discuss because it was that protest going on and stuff. Now I wanted to ask, was it the main discourse among protesters and that we are support, like we cannot, Russia cannot, I mean, that's, maybe I'm wrong, but that's the main context I was reading a lot, like you cannot interrupt our European integration like this. Or is there any way to not to be torn out between these two imperialist things, like neither Russia nor Europe? but yeah.
Thank you so much for this question. It's like my headache all the time. But yeah, I mean, our region was always like in between things, like always. Like we never had enough power to basically stay independent, like pure independency, where you don't care like what other countries are thinking about you, but just like you do you, and that's it. I think like Georgia never had this opportunity to be like purely independent from any other actors from the region. It was always something like Turkey, Iran, Russia, Mongolia, and then whatever. Everything and everybody was there basically. But in this case, I think it's a little bit tricky because right now there is, it seems that it's like huge war going on. Not only in Ukraine, but also in Georgia. In Georgia without the tanks, when like now it's all about the power, who is gonna be in the region, the guy, you know, like will it be Russia or will it be the US? Basically, it's not even about Europe. It's about like NATO and US power and like. Also, like when Georgian-Russian war happened in 2008, it was not about Georgia or this little spots, which like yeah, it was not about like the people who wanted to be independent from Georgia or Georgia wanted to have the small lands back to Georgia's integrity, but it was basically like a big war between West and Russia, and over the pipeline. Actually, it was. Like when the war was happening, they were bombing the pipeline just around, but not directly because it was owned by European Union, and that's how now they also signed this agreement, getting the gas from Azerbaijan through Georgia and then Turkey, etc. So it is never about like territory that we live in, but it's always like about this like bigger war of bigger brothers. And in this case, I would say like if there is no West or Europe, then Georgia is Russia. Like Georgia cannot be separated from all powers for now. If Georgia is not getting support from European Union, then there is no way Georgia can stand independent by itself. Like not even like hypothetically, but it will basically be occupied. The day when Georgia will be like, fuck you, Europe, Georgia will be occupied by Russia and nobody will do anything about it. So people in Georgia have no other option. And when they fight for European Union and for like joining the EU, they mean safety, they mean security, basically, both physical and economical. And right now I don't see any other option. But yeah, I don't know if this will ever change. But yeah.
So about the part with Russia, so my parents, they left during the Civil War that you showed on the screen, and they moved to Belgium. And so yeah, it's interesting to me that like it could have been an alternate timeline for me to actually grow up in Tbilisi. But so my parents, it's not like necessarily political Russia's influence. It's more like it's gotten very like almost personal. I'm not sure where exactly it comes from. So they still watch Russian television all the time. And they speak Russian, I speak Russian, they give me Russian. But none of them grew up in Russia. So what I'm wondering is is this like Stockholm syndrome style of like Russian influence still kind of like there in older generations that live in Georgia, or because I'm not sure why my parents are like invested. Like they have Putin on TV when it's midnight on New Year's Eve and stuff like that. I'm not sure why.
Oh yeah.
I just want to say that's like such Soviet traditions. Like it's just like screams Soviet Union to me. So like I suppose your parents were born in the Soviet Union, and have they always lived in like Georgia?
They left during the Civil War.
Yeah, but I mean, what time was that? Because I thought that was like maybe like when Georgia became independent.
Yeah, 91. Yeah.
Yeah, so like were they like did they always live in Georgia before that?
Yeah. I mean, my father's from Azerbaijan.
Yeah.
My mom is
So
from.
like I just feel like that's like such Soviet Union legacy, because like I grew up with something like that as well, especially like the generations that were born in the Soviet Union. I have experienced it so much in Ukraine, and like I'm kind of like in the mid-eastern part, so I can't speak for like Western Ukraine or something, but like I have been to so many numerous like houses where I go in and like people have like Moscow news, and I'm like, do you even know anyone in Russia? Like what's the connection exactly? Aside for like this history of like systematic propaganda and like putting Russian culture, language, and ideology onto every aspect of life. So I just feel like it could just be like that they're just so used to it. Because I feel like my parents and like my grandparents and that generation. They're just so used to it. Like, I know people like from my extended family who immigrated to the US, and like, I know I've seen their posts on Facebook that they're posting like Russian stuff on the New Year's, and I'm like, well, why are you still doing this? You know, this is like, to me, it's just so bizarre, but to me, that's just so clearly this Soviet, you know, colonizing legacy. Yeah.
Thank you both for these comments. But I don't think it's only Soviet Union. I think like this general tradition of New Year's speech from like queens and kings are still active. Like my friend from Denmark, she hello, she made us watch the Danish queen, which is giving the speech every year on New Year's Eve. So I don't think it's only Soviet Union, but it is sometimes the like yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's all about like how well you're doing the propaganda products, basically, because maybe Russian propaganda is better in what they're doing.
It sells better.
Sells better, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, they've never put a day of Belgian television on.
Yeah, I don't know. It's that's very interesting. Yeah, but like it goes even like worse. Like when the parents of some people in Georgia were like murdered or like put in exile in Siberia by the direct decision of Stalin. Even these people, they totally loved him till the end of their lives. So this is a very interesting aspect, actually. And yeah, it doesn't matter like what's happening. Like when you have something and it's just like switched, maybe I don't know.
Yeah, this is what really troubles me, because it's like this is obviously not your friend. So to be so invested in a culture that has caused a lot of pain, so it's a bit confusing to me.
Maybe we should invite them to Bethanien.
Yeah, we can try. Yeah. It's habit. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess thank you so much.
I have a
yeah, question.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted maybe like to take a moment that you maybe talk a little bit about what projects would you say and what are you doing, which are you doing in Untitled Gallery in Tbilisi reflect also like maybe like the search or representation of like the different ways queerness works in South Caucasus, maybe for the audience also like who doesn't know about what you're doing there. Yeah, and I think with this we can end so that we know only not about clubs, but also about galleries.
Yeah, like we are very much in deep collaboration with one organization from Baku. It's called Salam Cinema, and together with them we did several projects on the queer issues, but we also participated in the queer festival that they did 2 or 3 times already, and this year we're gonna do it again, but in Tbilisi, and we will include the countries like Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, to bring together the queer artists to talk about their own issues by themselves without the Western involvement, and that's what we do. And yeah, again, like we are always trying to be in the collaboration with the region and to really like open up the discussion through art. Yeah, and we also like hosted, as I said, artists who are at risk from the region. Like we had 2 artists from Azerbaijan who were transgender activists, but also the artists, and now they live in Tbilisi, and yeah, basically that. And we also have a lot of film screenings and different exhibitions, talks, public talks, basically, and all our activities are always open for public, and we never close the door for like specific community. Instead, we are encouraging the neighborhoods and everybody around us to come and listen or like take part in the discussion. And that's another interesting thing, is that like we never ever had any trouble from anybody around us who were like randomly popping in and just like listening to either conversation or seeing the very provocative exhibition or like seeing the movie, because I don't know, maybe it was based on the this one-to-one discussion and communication, basically, which is pretty much needed without this like aspect of we know better and we will teach you what to do, and I think that's very important.
I wanted to ask, is there any maybe web-based archive of queer history in the Caucasus that you could recommend? There is one website. It has like complicated long name, so I can send you later. Which was established by the German collective Polygonal, who came to Tbilisi, and they had like workshop, and they collected the queer art archive from Georgia. But my colleagues in Untitled also, they are right now working on creating queer internet archive, which is not only the artworks but a general appearance of queer language in different platforms. Like forums, social medias, etc., etc. So currently they are creating this like huge, again, archive of queer art, and not only art appearance in internet public spaces, basically. Other than that, there are like different organizations that they put their own research, basically, and Thank you.
But let's exchange the contacts. Yes.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to say thank you for your lecture. I come from Latvia, so it's interesting how strong the post-Soviet trauma is, and what things there are to share. I mean, where I come, it is different in the way that neither the language, the culture or the language has not been as Slavic, the language is not Slavic at all, but the Soviet Union deported so many Latvians and brought in so many Russian workers, and now we have this problem that 40% are Russian speaking, and there are several generations, they're Latvians too, just Russian Latvian, and it's a complicated situation, and integration is really necessary. Yet I was also triggered by the watching of Russian TV comment, because I also asked this question, why do people still, but it's getting better because of the recent events. People are being stronger. But anyway, I was just trying to say that what you were showing was really great, and I loved seeing it. That's all, I guess.
Thank you so much. Thank you. With this, I think the region is struggling a lot to get rid of post-Soviet stamp, basically. And it's been like, over 30 years already, and we are still considered as a post-Soviet state. And in Western English medias, you can already, you can still see basically the headlines like post-Soviet Georgia, and I'm like, soon it's gonna be like half a century already. Like, get over it, basically. But like, I think it's a mutual effort. It should come from the local community as well, but also from others calling you post-Soviets in this case. And I don't know. I was also wondering about this post aspect.
In research, for example, I think like geographically, like sometimes people also write former USSR, and it's kind of not temporality then because it's not post. It's just like it has been USSR at some point, but I don't know if it's so much better in the end. But yeah, maybe they will switch to like nearly European Union Georgia.
Georgians would love it. But yeah, it's, that's where we are right now. And yeah, come to Georgia. And if you have any like cool art projects also, our space is always open for collaborations. And but again, we are open for dialogue. That's very important to bring. Yeah. We need your support for coming and just being together, basically.
Thank you.
Thank you.